To talk today is on common poisonings in ruminants. And I have chosen because the subject is very wide and it's very difficult to uh, cover within 40 minutes or 45 minutes. So I have chosen three important and most prevalent poisonings in ruminants, and we'll discuss about that. Uh, and what I have tried to do today is bring you updates because you're all graduates and postgraduates, so you know the basic things. So I'll not go into details of basics, but I'll mostly try to tell you what is the new thinking in diagnosis and treatment of all these problems. Uh, so my lecture plan is to give you some idea about nitrate poisoning, oxalate poisoning, hydrocyanic acid poisoning, uh, and if time permits, I'll give a brief about accidental lead poisoning. But since these are accidental and only isolated cases, so let's see whether there is a time. Now, friends, there is always a question to differentiate between what is poison and what is toxin. Well, poison is a substance that has got a noxious effect on living organism, whereas a toxin is a poison which is produced by the organism. So that is the basic difference between the two. That means all the toxins will also be poisonous, but all poisons may not be toxins. So let's start with nitrate poisoning. Nitrate is an important ingredient of all the plant material, and nitrate is actually a metabolite which is acquired from soil nitrogen, and then soil nitrogen is converted into ammonia, and ammonia is converted into plant protein. So that is how is the nitrogen cycle. But what happens sometimes, the conversion of nitrate to nitrite happens, but then from nitrate to ammonia does not happen, and therefore nitrate starts getting accumulated, and when it is consumed in large amount, then there is a problem in case of ruminants. Now the source of nitrate could be both feed and water, but for us veterinarians, as far as ruminants are concerned, I think feed is a major source of nitrate poisoning. In chronic cases, there is a sublethal dosage, which will happen over a long period of time. Whereas in acute cases, there is immediate consumption of large quantities of nitrate-containing forage, which results in formation of methemoglobin, and this methemoglobin is not having good oxygen carrying capacity. So there are respiratory signs and dyspnea. Now, normally sheep and cattle are more susceptible than goat. Now, as far as most of these poisonings are concerned, you must remember that rumen microflora is able to take care of a lot of these alkaloids, glycosides, which may be toxic in nature. So depending upon what is the type of toxic material coming from fodder, a particular microflora in the rumen would start getting multiplied. Say for example, if I am talking about nitrate, and if nitrate is to be converted into non-toxic material in rumen, then the concerned bacteria would start multiplying. So you have a large amount of that bacteria present, and it takes care. So therefore, in ruminants, if you start giving small doses of these toxic materials like nitrates, then the ruminants become accustomed to it. They are able to take care of this material again up to some extent, and after that threshold is gone, then you would have the signs. That is number one situation. And number two situation is where there is sudden consumption of large amount of nitrate, so you don't have the right kind of microflora to take care of detoxification, and therefore you have the toxicity signs. There are large number of other factors also which are responsible for nitrate poisoning, and one of the things which every vet should remember is that for plant to accumulate nitrate from soil nitrogen, some amount of moisture in soil is necessary, and therefore in situations where there is drought, total drought and no water, and you see cracks in the soil, that is not the period at which you will get nitrate poisoning. Then the nitrate poisoning would start happening after a long drought, and then there is a rain. Then you have immediate conversion of nitrogen into nitrate, accumulation of nitrate, and this nitrate will cause problems. Now these are different crops, weeds. Some crops also contain a lot of these toxic material like nitrates. Cabbages, turnips, sugar beets, lettuce, potatoes, carrots, tomato, especially mentioned here because there are some areas where these are fed to cattle, especially in goat. A lot of vegetable waste is being taken from the vegetable markets and fed to goat. So these are some of the material which will end up with problems. Then there are crops like millet, oat, soybean, sorghum, Sudan grass, sweet clover, wheat, as well as tomato is also, because there are sometimes tomato harvesting, or if there is a crop of tomato and the prices crashes, then people tend to feed tomato plant, or after harvesting of tomato the plant is fed. So these are some of the important sources of nitrate. Now, as far as growth stage is concerned, young plant has more nitrate. Now, leaves and stem would have less nitrate than the lower part. It's generally said that the lower part, 6 inches, from the soil, is the one which is having the highest nitrate content. So, in situations where you harvest a crop, and after harvesting a crop, you leave it like that, and there is a rain. There is a rain, and after rain, you have some growth of the plant. That is the most dangerous period. And if at that point of time, usually instead of harvesting, what farmers would do is drive the cattle for grazing in that crop area, and that is where the nitrate poisoning would happen. So these are all acute cases of nitrate poisoning. But the second is chronic. In chronic, what happens? All these crops which are containing lots of nitrate kind of material you are feeding to cattle, but somehow the rumen health is not maintained because of not incorrect feeding of the feeding practices, less of water availability. All this results in damage to microflora, and microflora which otherwise should multiply for taking care of this nitrate would not happen, and then you would have what is called as chronic kind of nitrate poisoning. Cabbage is regarded as one of the important vegetable waste which is fed to cattle as well as goat as well as other animals. And about cabbage, there are 3 problems in cabbage. It's not only that it is very rich in nitrate, but it also very rich in calcium and also rich in soluble carbohydrates. So large consumption of cabbage would result in a lot of these problems related with nitrate, calcium, and carbohydrate. There is one more problem with cabbage, and that is it also contains thyrotrophic toxic substances which will cause goiter. And I have seen lots of these cases, especially in goat, where lot of cabbage is fed. Even I find lot of cities, these buffalo farmers take cabbage, waste cabbages from the vegetable market, and they feed to even buffaloes and cows. Especially in goat, I have seen that nothing much happens to goat because they are able to manage with whatever cabbage is fed. But the fetus which develops, the embryo which develops, is having severe goiter. So lots of cases where the kids are born with swelling in the thyroid related with goiter. Another problem with cabbage poisoning is presence of Heinz bodies, and these Heinz bodies are basically denatured hemoglobin, which will make the RBCs appear as foreign to the immune system, and they are cleared off by phagocytosis, and that's how hemolytic anemia would happen. So in case of cabbage, basically there are 2 kinds of syndromes that have been reported. One syndrome is called as hemolytic syndrome, where there is hemolysis, anemia, and hemoglobinuria. And there is another one where, because of high level of calcium, the calcium absorption becomes passive. And you all must be knowing that if you give lots of calcium, it also causes syndrome which is similar to calcium deficiency. So therefore, one has to be very cautious when you are feeding calcium, and this is across the species. When you give optimum quantity of calcium in the diet, the calcium absorption is in active form. So net absorption of calcium is extremely good. Whereas if you give lots of calcium, then it becomes a passive absorption, and passive absorption leads to less of calcium absorption, and therefore osteoporosis because of mobilization of calcium. And therefore there are outbreaks that have been reported where lots of cabbage feeding results in weakness in the hind limb, especially after calving, and then animal is not able to get up, something like downwards cow syndrome. Now let's see how to detect nitrate in forages, because this, I think this is a very rampant problem, especially in Konkan area as well as in Marathwada and Vidarbha area. So there, I think we have to be very vigilant and do mapping of presence of nitrates in forages during different season. So there are quick tests that are available for detecting nitrate in forages, and these are all semi-quantitative method. So one of the very common tests that is done is called the diphenylamine test. So here you have to just put 3 drops of this reagent into cut stem, which is cut open. You just put a few drops, and you can see the color which develops. So if blue color develops, then it is positive. And there is also a range given so that you can find out if it is within the threshold or beyond the threshold. This is how the blood will appear if it is nitrate poisoning. It's a bluish chocolate colored blood. Even the mucous membrane also becomes chocolate colored. There is rapid and difficult breathing because there is formation of methemoglobin, and this methemoglobin is not having optimum oxygen affinity. So oxygen carrying capacity of blood will be decreased. So there will be hypoxia, and all hypoxic kind of symptoms will be happening here. Usually pregnant animals who survive will also abort, and abortions generally occur approximately 10 to 14 days following exposure to nitrates. And that's why you have to take care of the pregnant animals if they have suffered from nitrate poisoning. Subclinical nitrate poisoning is also quite common, and it is known to reduce reproductive efficiency in adult cattle. It also lower weights gain with or without decreased feed intake in young stock. And research has shown that serum progesterone concentration may be decreased greatly in open animals, about 50%, and more moderately in early pregnancy. So this is the reason why in nitrate poisoning, you have problems related with fertility. So repeat breeding is very common. Services per conception would increase. So if this is a problem, then you need to check forages. And it's very easy to differentiate between a common source problem and an individual problem. Because if it is an individual cow related or buffalo related problem, because of hormone, because of ovaries, or because of some pathology in the reproductive tract, then you will have 1 or 2 animals that will be suffering. But if it is a common source, then you have a large number of problems. So I usually I usually differentiate between by looking at how many animals in the village, or how many animals within the herd is suffering from a particular problem. If you have more numbers, then it is a common source. If it is a common source, you can look at what nitrate as one of the candidate. This is again another test which can be done, and basically this should be done by the vet to know how much is the methemoglobin level, because the methemoglobin level in the blood will determine how aggressively you will have to treat, how many repetitions or frequency of injections you will have to do. And then also the whether the treatment is giving any response or not, that also you can determine by doing. It's a very simple test. What you need to do is take a white filter paper, take 1 drop of blood. It should be an adsorbent white, very clean paper. Put a drop of blood on it, and then once it is dried, immediately, within 5 minutes, you have to compare this, with the chart. So what I have done, I have given, this chart uh, on a portal called, www.indiancattle.com. So any vet who would like to test the filter paper can, go to the website, get this chart. There is also another continuous chart that has been given, which is based on the scanning of the color. So we have done scanning of, different, methemoglobin colors, and a continuous chart is there. So you can compare your filter paper with that chart and find out how much is the methemoglobin. And based on that, you can carry out the treatment. We are also trying to come up with a app so that, you can scan your, instead of looking at visually, you can just scan with the app. You can scan the drop, and immediately it will tell you how much is the methemoglobin, and what kind of treatment and how much treatment is to be given. So that, I think, should also be available very soon. Now, treatment of nitrate poisoning, it's very straightforward. You have to, give methylene blue injection. Methylene blue injection will result immediately in reduction of methemoglobin and, oxidation to, formation of normal hemoglobin. Now, methylene blue injection is available, by a company called, Prevan Blue. I think in Mumbai, there is one company called Avalon Pharma, which is making this product available. So it is 1% injection, and 1 to 2 ml per kg body weight you have to give. Sometimes you have to repeat. Remember, in all poisoning and toxicity, you have, two kinds of, approaches to treatment. One is specific antidote, and another one is, supportive. Both are extremely important, and many times I find that the supportive treatment is more important, which could be, followed by specific antidotes or specific treatment. And about that, we would be, seeing in next few slides. So in nitrate, methylene blue is the and supportive therapy like, diuretics, because sometimes methemoglobin will also cause nephrosis. So give, a lot of diuretics along with fluids to clear off all obnoxious materials, and removal of the source of the nitrate. Many times you have to replace the rumen microflora with the microflora from other healthy animal. I mean, many times, if cattle or buffalo rumen flora is not available, I have done, a lot of inoculum, from goat microflora also. I mean, you can go to any butcher, get, from a healthy buck, the rumen content, and sieve it, and the fluid part, can be fed to the animal, and because there is a lot of sharing of microflora between the two. You can also give, B complex injections. Especially, I prefer giving B complex orally here, for basic reason that I'm giving B complex to support the growth of rumen microflora. There is one more injection which is available, by INTA. It's called, Novizac. See, Novizac is the injection which has got sodium pyruvate, nucleotide, and buffered, phosphorus. Now, how this is, going to help in lots of poisoning cases, especially where there is Hens bodies, is because these Hens bodies are denatured hemoglobin that also occur in case of, nitrate poisoning. And sometimes you have, dual kind of, poisoning, where, you have Hens bodies and you also have, other kinds of pathologies. So this will, lead to reversal of denatured hemoglobin because of reverse TCA cycle. That is, instead of utilizing glucose, it will be utilizing pyruvate, from the other end, and then the denatured hemoglobin, would be resolved. Otherwise, if you don't take care of methemoglobin, then what is going to happen is, these Hens bodies will still remain in circulation, and even if you have treated cases of methemoglobin, but these RBCs which are recognized as foreign, will still be cleared. So you will have continued hemolytic anemia. Then onion poisoning. Onion poisoning again is, caused because of certain alkaloids called, alkaloid propyl disulfide, and very, similar kind of, high sulfur containing amino acids, or toxic material like, alkaloids. So rumen microflora can degrade these, can degrade these alkalides if it is, fed in, within the threshold. Generally, it is said that up to 25% of the feed, if you're, including onion bulbs as well as onion plant, rumen is, able to take care of this. Whereas if you, go to 50% and 75%, then probably there are problems. There have been lots of cases of onion poisoning reported in literature. Generally, it is said that goat are, quite resistant. Even sheep, have also been found to be relatively resistant to onion poisoning. So they say that even to pregnant goat and pregnant sheep, you can give up to 75% onion, can be replaced in the feed. So in those areas where there is onion farming, and if you find that a lot of, onion material is available cheap, you can give it to sheep and goat. But in case of, cattle, if you want to give, you can replace it to 25%, and up to that level, you will find that, milk will not be having, the smell of the onion. Otherwise, if you have, large quantity in feed, then you are likely to get some smell, onion like, smell even in milk. Now the symptoms here are, constant vocalization, weakness, and hemolytic anemia, Hens bodies. These are the Hens bodies which I was, talking about, and these are all, present in lots of diseases in, cattle and buffaloes. For example, I have noticed these Hens bodies even in phosphorus deficiency hemoglobinuria. Then Breckenfen poisoning, all Brassica family, like, cabbage, etc., would also lead to, formation of these. And this is probably because of, very high calcium level, which leads to, low phosphorus. And because of low phosphorus, you have glucose uptake, which is less. And because of that, you have accumulation of, these Hens bodies. So that's why I have said that, we treat it with Novizac, so that there is a, inverse TCA cycle is stimulated, and then there is ATP formation. And because of that, this, Hens bodies will be resolved. Now I'll give you, a brief idea of, what is the general approach to treatment of poisoning. So as I have said, supportive therapy is very important. So intravenous dextrose. Now, in case of poisoning, if you want to give intravenous dextrose, always give 50% or 25%, because here you will also be giving some kind of, energy which is required, because the because there would be hypoglycemia because of toxic material which is also affected. Then you can also give IV fluid to maintain hydration and induce diuresis. Now, whenever you are giving, IV fluid for dehydration, always remember that you want tissue perfusion. You don't want to load, lot of, you don't want to, load the circulation because of rapid intravenous infusion. I know it is very difficult, because when you are out there in the field, you have to hold the animal, and then, you can't, afford to spend 2 hours or 3 hours. But, if you really want good tissue perfusion, and if you want that your fluid should help the animal and not only cause diuresis, then giving it very slow is extremely important. Then there are people who also give Ringer's lactate, but always are not able to differentiate when to give 5% dextrose, or, sodium chloride injection, or Ringer's lactate. So for, there is one quick rule which I generally follow, and that is, if there is systemic acidosis, I would generally, prefer Ringer's lactate, followed by some other IV fluid which is isotonic. Now, how do I diagnose systemic acidosis? By just looking at the breathing. If breathing is very rapid and shallow, and there are other signs suggesting that there could be systemic acidosis, I would usually start with, Ringer's lactate, because Ringer's lactate would also bring down, because it contains lactate, and lactate will be converted into bicarbonate, and that's how the systemic acidosis will also be taken care of. Another thing to remember here is that, whatever injection you are going to give, you are giving in vein, and from vein it has to come back into circulation, and for coming back into circulation, you need good, peripheral circulation. If there is no good peripheral circulation, the venous return is going to be less, and therefore you have to be very careful to ensure that peripheral circulation has resumed. And the test which I usually do is, I just touch the extremities of the animal. If extremities are very cold, and if I am not able to get good pulse in the extremity, then I will assume that the peripheral circulation is, compromised, and there I would like to see that the peripheral circulation is improved. And one of the measures which you can take is, you can give norepinephrine or noradrenaline, which is available in the market. That can be given as a very slow injections over, say, about half an hour. You can give it either with your syringe very slowly, so that you maintain per minute perfusion. Keep an eye on her heart rate, and then also keep on checking whether the extremities have started warming up. Then for taking care of acidosis, you also sometimes need to give sodium bicarbonate injection. Now sodium bicarbonate injection is available 8.4%, and the dose is 2.5 to 3.5 ml. Never mix sodium bicarbonate with calcium injection. There are also people I have seen who would like to jump and give calcium. I don't know for what reason, and they feel that if there is peripheral hypothermia, and if heart rate is less, they usually think it is because of hypocalcemia and jump at giving calcium injection. And sometimes they would mix sodium bicarbonate with calcium. So avoid that, because there will be physical interaction. Then some oral adsorbents can also be given, like activated carbon or activated charcoal, which will adsorb. Remember, again, there is a difference between adsorption and between binding. So lots of material that is available out in the market is activated carbon, but they only adsorb, and it's really not known whether remains intact till the material is out in the feces. So therefore, there are now new materials that are coming up in the market, which are called as aminated, activated carbon, like ACED or ACETA. These are all amine. So these are all very ionic kind of activated carbon, and they will covalently bind, especially the mycotoxins. Like alpha. You have all those mycotoxins from Aspergillus and other fungus. So they will bind, and that is a irreversible binding. So you will not have problems of re-release of the mycotoxins or these kind of toxins. Then I'll give you some idea about general antidotes, like atropine sulfate. We all know is an antidote for organophosphates and carbamate poisoning. Please remember, only these two insecticide and pesticides are the one which will require atropine. Otherwise, don't think atropine sulfate is a general antidote for all poisonings. Atropine sulfate injection will also have its own side effects, especially if it is not required. Then there will be atropinization, and a lot of other signs will also happen. There is also another product available in the market which is a replacement of atropine sulfate, and it has same effect of atropine sulfate, but it does not have the the side effects or the other kind of unwanted actions of the atropine sulfate. It's called as a glycopyrrolene bromidine. It's available as pyrroline injection or Vagolate injection. Now this can also be given, so this will also take care of similar action like atropine sulfate. Then another antidote is dimercaprol. Now dimercaprol is a good old our friend British anti-lewisite in a ball. We have been taught about this in colleges in toxicology. So this is also available in the market and can be given. Then there are also chelating materials like calcium EDTA, which can also be given. And sometimes if there is specific poisoning where you feel that there is hypocalcemia, you can also give calcium borugluconate, but always give it separately. And whenever calcium borugluconate I would never give entire calcium borugluconate IV, because if I give ionic calcium, most of it will be excreted in urine. So I would always give half intravenous to trigger mobilization of calcium, and half I would give subcut, so that there is a constant release of calcium. Then there is also supportive therapy like corticosteroids. I generally don't use corticosteroids in case of poisoning because of its lots of side effects, unless and until I'm very sure that corticosteroid is going to help. I do use diuretic like furosemide to to induce diuresis, so that I get clearance. Again, while using furosemide, please see that there is no hypokalemia and hypomagnesemia. So you have to be very careful. Otherwise, I see people loading with Lasix injection twice a day, thrice a day. Doses are given for a very long period of time. it may have problems. Another thing to remember with furosemide is never use gentamicin, amikacin, and streptomycin. So whenever you are giving these antibiotics, never use furosemide because it will increase renal toxicity. Then sometimes there are convulsions in poisoning, so you need to also take care of convulsions. So for that, you can give diazepam or midazolam. So I prefer usually because it has got less side effects than diazepam, uh, although it is short term. But then it is I usually follow it by giving a phenytoin injection, because then phenytoin will take care of the new convulsion bursts that are going to come up. So this is how you can take care of seizures. Now we come up SCN poisoning. Chronic would cause hypothyroidism, whereas acute would cause respiratory